Chapter 52 of the Golden Bough. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Golden Bough by Sir James Frazer. Chapter 52. Killing the Divine Animal. 1. Killing the Sacred Buzzard. In the preceding chapters we saw that many communities which have progressed as far as to subsist mainly by agriculture have been in the habit of killing and eating their farinaceous deities either in the proper form of corn, rice, and so forth, or in the borrowed shapes of animals and men. It remains to show that hunting and pastoral tribes, as well as agricultural peoples, have been in the habit of killing the beings whom they worship. Among the worshipful beings or gods, if indeed they deserve to be dignified by that name, whom hunters and shepherds adore and kill, are animals pure and simple, not animals regarded as embodiments of other supernatural beings. Our first example is drawn from the Indians of California, who, living in a fertile country under a serene and temperate sky, nevertheless rank near the bottom of the savage scale. The Achagchemembe tribe adored the great buzzard, and once a year they celebrated a great festival called Panis, or bird feast, in its honor. The day selected for the festival was made known to the public on the evening before its celebration, and preparations were at once made for the erection of a special temple, Vanquech, which seems to have been a circular or oval enclosure of stakes, with the stuffed skin of a coyote or prairie wolf set up on a hurdle to represent the god Chinigchinich. When the temple was ready, the bird was carried into it in a solemn procession, and laid on an altar erected for the purpose. Then all the young women, whether married or single, began to run to and fro as if distracted, some in one direction and some in another, while the elders of both sexes remained silent spectators of the scene, and the captains, tricked out in paint and feathers, danced round their adored bird. These ceremonies being concluded, they seized upon the bird and carried it to the principal temple, all the assembly uniting in the grand display, and the captains dancing and singing at the head of the procession. Arrived at the temple, they killed the bird without losing a drop of its blood. The skin was removed entire and preserved with the feathers as a relic or for the purpose of making the festival garment or pailt. The carcass was buried in a hole in the temple, and the old women gathered round the grave weeping and moaning bitterly, while they threw various kinds of seeds or pieces of food upon it, crying out, "Why did you run away? Would you not have been better with us? You would have made pinole, a kind of gruel, as we do, and if you had not run away, you would have not become a panis," and so on. When this ceremony was concluded, the dancing was resumed and kept up for 3 days and nights. They said that Panis was a woman who had run off to the mountains and there been changed into a bird by the god Chinigchinich. They believed that though they sacrificed the bird annually, she came to life again and returned to her home in the mountains. Moreover, they thought that as often as the bird was killed, it became multiplied, because every year all the different capitanes celebrated the same feast of Panis, and were firm in the opinion that the birds sacrificed were but one and same female. The unity in multiplicity, thus postulated by the Californians, is very noticeable and helps to explain their motive for killing the divine bird. The notion of the life of a species as distinct from that of an individual, easy and obvious as it seems to us, appears to be one which the Californian savage cannot grasp. He is unable to convince the life of the species otherwise than as an individual life, and therefore as exposed to the same dangers and calamities which menace and finally destroy the life of the individual. Apparently, he imagines that the species left to itself will grow old and die like an individual, and that therefore some step must be taken to save from extinction the particular species which he regards as divine. The only means he can think of to avert the catastrophe is to kill a member of the species in whose reins the tide of life is still running strong, and has not yet stagnated among the fens of old age. The life thus diverted from one channel will flow, he fancies, more freshly and freely in a new one. In other words, the slain animal will revive and enter on a new term of life, with all the spring and energy of youth. To us this reasoning is transparently absurd, but so too is the custom. A similar confusion, it may be noted, between the individual life and the life of the species was made by the Samoans. Each family had for its god a particular species of animal, yet the death of one of these animals, for example an owl, was not the death of the god. He was supposed to be yet alive and incarnate in all the owls in existence. 2. Killing the sacred ram. The rude Californian rite, which we have just considered, has a close parallel in the religion of ancient Egypt. The Thebans and all other Egyptians who worshipped the Theban god Ammon held rams to be sacred and would not sacrifice them. But once a year at the festival of Ammon, they killed a ram, skinned it, and clothed the image of the god in the skin. Then they mourned over the ram and buried it in a sacred tomb. The custom was explained by a story that Zeus had once exhibited himself to Hercules, clad in the fleece and wearing the head of a ram. Of course, the ram in this case was simply the beast god of Thebes, as the wolf was the beast god of Lycopolis, and the goat was the beast god Mendes. In other words, the ram was Ammon himself. On the monuments, it is true, Ammon appears in a semi-human form with the body of a man and the head of a ram, but this only shows that he was in the usual chrysalis state, through which beast gods regularly pass before they emerge as full-blown anthropomorphic gods. The ram, therefore, was killed not as a sacrifice to Ammon, but as the god himself, whose identity with the beast is plainly shown by the custom of clothing his image in the skin of the slain ram. The reason for thus killing the ram god annually may have been that which I have assigned for the general custom of killing God, and for the special Californian custom of killing the divine buzzard. As applied to Egypt, this explanation is supported by the analogy of the bull god Apis, who was not suffered to outlive a certain term of years. The intention of thus putting a limit to the life of a human god was, as I have argued, to secure him from the weakness and frailty of age. The same reasoning would explain the custom, probably an older one, of putting the beast god to death annually, as was done with the ram of Thebes. One point in the Theban ritual, the application of the skin to the image of the god, deserves particular attention. If the god was at first the living ram, his representation by an image must have originated later. But how did it originate? One answer to this question is perhaps furnished by the practice of preserving the skin of the animal which is slain as divine. The Californians, as we have seen, preserve the skin of the buzzard, and the skin of the goat, which is killed on the harvest field as a representative of the corn spirit, is kept for various superstitious purposes. The skin, in fact, was kept as a token or memorial of the god, or rather as containing in it part of the divine life, and it had only to be stuffed or stretched upon a frame to become a regular image of him. At first an image of this kind would be renewed annually, the new image being provided by the skin of the slain animal. But from annual images to permanent images the transition is easy. We have seen that the older custom of cutting a new maypole every year was superseded by the practice of maintaining a permanent maypole, which was, however, annually decked with fresh flowers and leaves, and even surmounted each year by a fresh young tree. Similarly, when the stuffed skin, as a representative of the god, was replaced by a permanent image of him in wood, stone, or metal, the permanent image was annually clad in the fresh skin of the slain animal. When this stage had been reached, the custom of killing the ram came naturally to be interpreted as a sacrifice offered to the image, and was explained by a story like that of Ammon and Hercules. 3. Killing the sacred serpent. West Africa appears to furnish another example of the annual killing of a sacred animal, and the preservation of its skin. The Negroes of Issapu, in the island of Fernando Po, regard the cobra capella as their guardian deity, who can do them good or ill, bestow riches or inflict disease and death. The skin of one of these reptiles is hung tail downwards from a branch of the highest tree in the public square, and the placing of it on the tree is an annual ceremony. As soon as the ceremony is over, all children born within the past year are carried out and their hands made to touch the tail of the serpent's skin. The latter custom is clearly a way of placing